Have you ever wondered how someone who never wrote a single word became one of history's most influential philosophers? How a man who walked barefoot through ancient marketplaces, asking strangers uncomfortable questions, ended up shaping the way humanity thinks today? I'm about to take you on a journey through the life of Socrates, a philosopher who lived 2,500 years ago but whose wisdom speaks directly to the chaos of our modern world. This isn't just another history lesson. This is about understanding 20 powerful principles that can transform how you think, how you live, and how you see truth itself. So settle in, because what you're about to discover has been changing lives for millennia, and today, it's your turn. Picture ancient Athens around 470 BCE. This isn't just any city. This is the birthplace of democracy, the center of art, culture, and intellectual revolution. Marble temples reach toward the sky. Philosophers debate in open forums. Citizens vote on laws that affect their lives. And in the middle of all this grandeur walks a peculiar man. He's not handsome. His nose is flat, his eyes bulge, his belly protrudes. He wears the same simple robe every day. His feet are bare. He has no money, no political power, no army. Yet this unremarkable-looking person will become the most remarkable mind of his generation. This is Socrates, and his story begins not with answers, but with questions. Now let me share the first major lesson from Socrates' life. Question everything you think you know. Socrates wasn't trying to show off when he asked questions. He genuinely believed that most people, including himself, knew far less than they claimed. Imagine someone approaching you today and asking, "What is justice?" You'd probably give an answer. Then they'd ask, "But what about this situation? Does your definition still apply?" And slowly, through a series of simple questions, they'd reveal that what you thought was rock-solid knowledge was actually just opinion dressed up as fact. This is what Socrates did every single day in Athens. He would approach respected politicians, celebrated poets, skilled craftsmen, anyone who claimed expertise, and through questioning, he'd expose the fragility of their supposed wisdom. He wasn't being cruel. He was searching for truth. And he discovered something profound: the wisest person is the one who knows they know nothing. Think about that for a moment. In today's world, we're drowning in information. Social media rewards confidence, not accuracy. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone shares it as if it's gospel truth. But how often do we actually question our own beliefs? How often do we ask ourselves, "Why do I believe this? What evidence supports this? Could I be wrong?" Socrates teaches us that intellectual humility, the ability to admit "I don't know," is not weakness. It's the foundation of wisdom. When you accept that you don't know everything, your mind opens. You become curious instead of defensive. You seek understanding instead of validation. This is the first step toward real growth. So here's your challenge: identify one belief you hold strongly and ask yourself, "Why do I believe this? Could there be another perspective I haven't considered?" That's thinking like Socrates. The second lesson takes us deeper into Socrates' method. Live and examine life, because an unexamined life isn't worth living. These are Socrates' own words, spoken during his trial when he faced death. For him, this wasn't just philosophy. It was a declaration of how life should be lived. But what does it mean to examine your life? It means stopping the autopilot. Most people wake up, go through their routines, react to whatever happens, and collapse into bed without ever pausing to think, "Why am I doing this? Is this making me happy? Am I becoming the person I want to be? Are my values reflected in my actions?" We live like machines, following scripts written by society, family, or habit. We chase money because everyone says it brings happiness. We pursue status because culture tells us it matters. We avoid difficult conversations because discomfort feels unbearable. But Socrates says this robotic existence is not truly living. An examined life means regularly asking yourself tough questions. Am I living according to my values, or am I compromising them for convenience? Are my relationships making me better, or are they draining my spirit? Am I spending my time on what truly matters, Or am I distracted by what's urgent but unimportant? This kind of self-reflection is uncomfortable. When you examine your life honestly, you see your flaws, your fears, your failures. It's like looking in a mirror without filters. No wonder most people avoid it. But Socrates believed this discomfort is necessary. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. You can't grow if you refuse to see where you're stuck. The examined life isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about becoming conscious of your choices so you can make better ones. Start small. Every evening, spend 5 minutes reviewing your day. What went well? What could I have done better? Did I act with integrity? These simple questions, asked consistently, will transform you. You'll start making decisions with intention instead of impulse. You'll align your actions with your values. You'll become the author of your life instead of a character in someone else's story. Now the third lesson reveals Socrates' famous method. Use questions to uncover truth. The Socratic method, as it's called today, is taught in the world's best law schools, medical programs, and business courses. Why? Because it works. Socrates didn't lecture people. He didn't write textbooks. Instead, he engaged in dialogue. He would ask a question, listen to the answer, then ask another question that exposed inconsistencies or assumptions in that answer. He'd continue this process, peeling back layers of misunderstanding until the person either reached genuine insight or admitted they didn't actually know what they claimed to know. Let me show you how this works. Imagine Socrates meets a general who boasts about understanding courage. Socrates asks, "What is courage?" The general replies, "Courage is standing your ground in battle and never retreating." Socrates nods thoughtfully, then asks, "But what about a general who strategically retreats to lure the enemy into a trap? Is that cowardice?" The general pauses. "No, that's smart tactics, and it takes courage to execute." Socrates smiles. So courage isn't just standing firm. Sometimes retreating requires courage too. Then what exactly is courage? Now the general is confused. His simple definition has crumbled. This is the destructive phase of the Socratic method, where false certainty is demolished. But there's a constructive phase too. Once both people admit they don't have a clear answer, they work together to find truth. They're no longer opponents. They're partners in discovery. You can use this method in your own life. When someone states a strong opinion, don't argue. Ask questions. That's interesting. What makes you believe that? Have you considered this alternative scenario? How would your view apply in this situation? Often, people haven't thought deeply about their beliefs. Questions force them to examine their reasoning. Sometimes they'll discover their position is solid. Sometimes they'll realize it needs refinement. Either way, everyone learns. This method also works with yourself. When you feel strongly about something, interrogate that feeling. Why do I believe this? What assumptions am I making? What evidence supports this? What evidence contradicts it? This internal Socratic dialogue prevents you from becoming trapped in ideological bubbles. It keeps your mind flexible and your thinking sharp. The goal isn't to win arguments. It's to get closer to truth. And truth, Socrates believed, is worth more than comfort, status, or popularity. The fourth lesson centers on virtue. Virtue is knowledge, and evil is ignorance. This might be Socrates' most controversial idea. He believed that if someone truly understood what was good, they would always choose it. Therefore, when people do bad things, it's because they don't truly understand the consequences. They're ignorant of what's genuinely good for them. Now, you might object, but people knowingly do wrong all the time. They lie, cheat, steal even when they know it's bad. Socrates would say they don't really know. They have information, but not wisdom. Let me explain. A smoker knows cigarettes are harmful. That information is printed on the package. But do they truly understand, deep in their soul, how smoking will rob them of years with their grandchildren? How it will steal their breath, their health, their freedom? If they had that profound understanding, Socrates argues, they couldn't smoke. Their knowledge would overpower their craving. The same applies to lying. Yes, someone might know lying is wrong. But in the moment, they see the lie as solving an immediate problem. They're blind to how it erodes trust, damages relationships, and corrodes their own integrity. They lack the wisdom to see the full picture. They're ignorant of the true cost. This idea has radical implications. If wrongdoing stems from ignorance, then we shouldn't hate criminals. We should educate them. Prisons shouldn't just punish. They should transform. A thief is an evil. They're confused about what will truly make them happy. They see money as the path to fulfillment and miss the deeper value of integrity, peace, and genuine connection. Now, I know this is hard to accept. We want to believe people choose evil consciously. It feels more just to punish deliberate wrongdoing than to excuse it as mere ignorance. But Socrates isn't excusing anything. He's diagnosing the problem. And his diagnosis suggests a solution: wisdom. If we can help people truly understand the consequences of their choices, if we can show them what genuine goodness looks like, they'll naturally move toward it. No one wakes up wanting to be miserable. Everyone seeks happiness. But not everyone knows how to find it. That's the ignorance Socrates wants to cure. So when you encounter someone making terrible choices, instead of simply condemning them, ask, what don't they understand? What wisdom are they missing? How can I help them see more clearly? This doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means addressing the root cause, not just the symptoms. Let me share the fifth lesson now. Be like a gadfly, challenging society to stay awake. During his trial, Socrates compared himself to a gadfly, a biting insect that stings a lazy horse to keep it moving. He said Athens was that horse, comfortable but complacent, and he was the gadfly sent by the gods to sting it into awareness. He knew his questions annoyed people. He knew his challenges to authority made enemies. But he believed Athens needed this irritation to stay vibrant and just. Without people questioning power, asking uncomfortable questions, and challenging assumptions, society grows stagnant. Corruption takes root. Injustice becomes normal. People accept things they shouldn't. Socrates refused to let that happen. He spent every day in the marketplace, engaging citizens in dialogue, exposing contradictions in their thinking, pushing them to examine their lives and their city. The powerful hated him for it. Politicians, poets, and sophists who claimed expertise were humiliated when Socrates revealed their ignorance. Youth loved watching these public takedowns. They followed Socrates around, learning his method and applying it themselves. This made Socrates dangerous. When you teach people to think critically, they start questioning everything, including authority. Athens' leaders saw Socrates as a threat. They accused him of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. But Socrates wasn't corrupting anyone. He was teaching them to think. He wasn't disrespecting the gods. He was questioning whether the authorities truly understood what the gods wanted. There's a crucial lesson here for us. Every society needs gadflies. Every organization, every community, every family needs people willing to ask hard questions. Without them, groupthink takes over. Bad ideas go unchallenged. Power goes unchecked. But being a gadfly comes with a cost. People don't like being stung. They don't enjoy having their comfort disturbed. If you speak truth to power, if you question the status quo, if you refuse to go along with the crowd, you'll face resistance. You might be mocked, marginalized, or worse. Socrates was sentenced to death for being a gadfly. But he never stopped. Because he knew that silence in the face of injustice is itself a form of injustice. So ask yourself, am I willing to be a gadfly? Am I willing to ask uncomfortable questions when everyone else stays quiet? Am I willing to challenge ideas that everyone accepts without thought? This doesn't mean being contrarian for its own sake. It means having the courage to speak truth even when it's unpopular. That's how positive change happens. That's how societies improve. One courageous voice at a time. The sixth lesson shows us the power of integrity. Stand by your principles, even when it costs you everything. After Socrates was sentenced to death, he had a month to live. During that time, his wealthy friend Crito visited him in prison with a plan. Crito had bribed the guards. He had a boat ready. Socrates could escape to another city and live. Crito begged him to flee. But Socrates refused. Why? Because escaping would mean breaking the law. It would mean betraying everything he'd taught. All his life, Socrates had preached the importance of following just principles, of respecting the social contract, of living with integrity. If he ran now, he'd prove himself a hypocrite. He'd be saying that principles matter only when they're convenient. So he stayed. He explained to Crito that even though Athens had wrongly condemned him, running would harm Athens more. It would show that laws can be ignored when they're inconvenient. It would undermine the very system that, despite its flaws, had given him life, education, and community. This is staggering integrity. Most people compromise their principles when the stakes get high. They cheat on their taxes because everyone does. They lie to avoid conflict. They stay silent when they should speak because speaking out might cost them. But Socrates knew that integrity isn't situational. You can't claim to value honesty and then lie when it benefits you. You can't preach justice and then act unjustly when it suits you. Your principles are either real or they're pretend. Socrates chose real. Even knowing it would cost him his life, he honored his principles. On the day of his execution, he was calm. He spent his final hours discussing philosophy with friends, exploring ideas about the soul and the afterlife. When the guard brought the poisonous hemlock, Socrates drank it without hesitation. His last words were reportedly about settling a debt, showing his attention to duty even in death. He didn't die in fear or regret. He died with dignity, his principles intact. That's the power of integrity. It gives you peace even in your darkest hour. Because you know you stayed true to yourself. You didn't betray your values for comfort or survival. You lived and died as yourself, not as a fraud. Now ask yourself, what are my non-negotiable principles? What values do I claim to hold? Am I living them every day, or only when it's easy? Integrity isn't tested during good times. It's tested when doing the right thing costs you something. That's when you discover who you really are. Socrates discovered he was a man of principle to the very end. What will you discover about yourself? The seventh lesson is about knowledge. Admit what you don't know. Socrates famously said, "I know that I know nothing." This wasn't false modesty. It was genuine wisdom. Most people walk around pretending they understand things they don't. They parrot opinions they've heard. They confidently assert beliefs they've never examined. They fear admitting ignorance because they think it makes them look weak. But Socrates understood the opposite is true. Admitting ignorance is strength. It's the beginning of wisdom. When you say I don't know, you open yourself to learning. Your ego steps aside. Your defensiveness drops. You become curious instead of closed-minded. This is why Socrates was able to learn from everyone he met, from generals to shoemakers. He approached each person with genuine curiosity, asking questions, listening to answers, and learning from their expertise. He didn't pretend to know what he didn't. He celebrated his ignorance because it meant there was still so much to discover. Contrast this with the sophists of Athens, professional teachers who charged fees to teach rhetoric and debate. They claimed to know everything. They could argue any side of any issue, not because they cared about truth, but because they were skilled in persuasion. For them, knowledge was a commodity to be sold. But Socrates saw knowledge as a sacred pursuit, something that couldn't be bought or sold, only discovered through honest inquiry. He never charged for his teachings. He never claimed to have all the answers. He simply invited people to think with him, to question with him, to search for truth together. This humility made him truly wise. In our age of information overload, this lesson is more important than ever. We have access to more data than any generation in history. But data isn't wisdom. You can Google facts in seconds, but understanding those facts, integrating them into a coherent worldview, seeing how they connect to deeper truths. That requires humility and hard thinking. It requires admitting that you might be wrong, that your understanding might be incomplete, that there's always more to learn. So practice intellectual humility. When someone challenges your view, don't immediately defend it. Consider their perspective. Ask yourself if you might be missing something. Be willing to change your mind when presented with better evidence or reasoning. This doesn't make you weak or inconsistent. It makes you wise. Because wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and being humble enough to admit when you don't know. The eighth lesson comes from the trial itself. Truth matters more than popularity. When Socrates stood before the jury of 500 Athenian citizens, he didn't do what any lawyer would recommend. He didn't appeal to their emotions. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't bring his weeping family to elicit sympathy. Instead, he defended his life's work. He explained why questioning authority was necessary. He argued that his philosophical inquiries made Athens better, not worse. He compared himself to a gadfly stinging a lazy horse. And when asked to propose his own punishment, he suggested he deserved free meals in the city hall, an honor reserved for Olympic champions and war heroes. The jury was outraged. They saw this as arrogance, as contempt for the court. They voted to execute him by a larger margin than they'd voted to convict him. Socrates could have saved himself with a simple speech of remorse. But he refused to compromise truth for survival. This teaches us something profound. Truth isn't determined by popularity. Just because everyone believes something doesn't make it true. Just because an idea is unpopular doesn't make it wrong. Socrates knew his message was true, that people needed to examine their lives, that virtue was the highest good, that ignorance was the root of evil. He knew this truth mattered more than whether people liked hearing it. So he spoke it, even knowing it would cost him everything. In our age of social media, where likes and shares measure value, this lesson is crucial. How many people compromise truth to be popular? How many water down their message to avoid offending anyone? How many stay silent when they should speak because speaking truth might cost them followers, friends, or opportunities? Socrates shows us another way. Speak truth. Stand by it. Let people respond however they will. Because the alternative, living a life for the sake of popularity, hollows you out from the inside. You become a performer rather than a person. You lose yourself trying to please everyone. But when you speak and live your truth, regardless of how others react, you become unshakable. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. And that inner certainty is worth more than any external validation. So ask yourself, am I compromising truth to be liked? Am I staying silent when I should speak? Am I living authentically, or am I performing for an audience? Choose truth. Even if it makes you unpopular. Because popularity fades, but truth endures. And a life lived in truth, no matter how difficult, is better than a comfortable lie. The ninth lesson addresses influence. Your impact isn't measured by what you write, but by how you live. Socrates never wrote anything. Not one word. Every philosopher before him left texts, treatises, theories documented for posterity. But not Socrates. So how do we know about him? Through his students, primarily Plato and Xenophon, who wrote down conversations and teachings. This creates a fascinating puzzle scholars call the Socratic problem. How much of what Plato wrote reflects the real Socrates, and how much is Plato's own philosophy put into his teacher's mouth? We'll never know for certain. But here's what we do know. Socrates' influence was so powerful that his greatest student, Plato, devoted his life to preserving and extending his teacher's ideas. And Plato's student, Aristotle, became one of history's most influential thinkers. This chain of intellectual inheritance, from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle, shaped Western civilization. Not through books Socrates wrote, but through the life he lived. His example inspired others. His method taught them how to think. His integrity showed them what philosophy looked like in practice. That's a profound lesson for all of us. We obsess over legacy. We want to write books, build companies, create something lasting with our name on it. But Socrates shows us that the deepest impact comes from how you live. The way you treat people. The questions you ask. The values you embody. The courage you demonstrate. These things inspire others far more than any document ever could. When you live with authenticity and purpose, you become a living example. People watch you. They learn from you. They're challenged by you. And they carry pieces of you forward into their own lives, spreading their influence in ways you'll never see or measure. So stop worrying about building a platform or leaving a monument. Focus on living well. Focus on being someone worth emulating. Focus on asking good questions, loving people sincerely, standing by your principles, and pursuing truth relentlessly. That's how you change the world. Not through what you produce, but through who you are. Socrates proved it 2,500 years ago, and it's still true today. Let me share the 10th lesson now. Foster dialogue over debate. There's a crucial difference between debate and dialogue, and Socrates understood it perfectly. In debate, you try to win. You defend your position, attack your opponents, and aim for victory. The goal is to prove you're right and they're wrong. But in dialogue, you search for truth together. You're not opponents. You're partners. You ask questions, explore ideas, challenge assumptions, and build understanding collaboratively. Socrates always chose dialogue over debate. He wasn't trying to crush his opponents. He was inviting them to think more deeply. Even when he exposed contradictions in their beliefs, he did it with respect, as a way to help them see more clearly. This approach transforms conflict into growth. Instead of creating enemies, it creates learning opportunities. Instead of leaving both sides entrenched in their positions, it opens minds and builds bridges. Think about how different our world would be if we embraced dialogue over debate. Political conversations wouldn't be shouting matches. They'd be genuine explorations of complex issues. Family conflicts wouldn't escalate into bitter feuds. They'd become chances to understand each other better. Social media wouldn't be a battleground of hot takes and dunks. It would be a space for collective thinking and mutual learning. To practice Socratic dialogue, follow these principles. First, approach conversations with curiosity, not certainty. Assume you might learn something. Second, ask open-ended questions rather than making statements. What makes you think that works better than you're wrong? Third, listen fully before responding. Understand their perspective before sharing yours. Fourth, look for common ground. Find areas of agreement before exploring differences. Fifth, focus on ideas, not individuals. Attack arguments, not people. Sixth, be willing to change your mind. If someone makes a better case, acknowledge it. When you practice dialogue this way, something magical happens. People soften. Defenses come down. Real communication begins. You might not agree on everything, but you'll understand each other better. And understanding is the foundation of wisdom, of empathy, of progress. So the next time you disagree with someone, don't debate them. Engage them in dialogue. Ask questions. Listen genuinely. Explore their thinking. You might discover that what seemed like a simple issue is actually quite complex. You might find that both of you are partly right and partly wrong. You might realize that truth is richer and more nuanced than either position captures. That's the gift of dialogue. That's what Socrates offered everyone he met. And it's what we desperately need today. The 11th lesson reveals the purpose of education. Education isn't about filling minds, but about awakening them. Socrates compared himself to a midwife. Just as a midwife doesn't create the baby but helps bring it into the world, Socrates didn't pour knowledge into his students. He helped them give birth to ideas that were already inside them. He believed wisdom exists within every person, buried under layers of false beliefs and social conditioning. His job was to ask the right questions to help that wisdom emerge. This is radically different from how most education works today. We treat students like empty vessels to be filled. Teachers lecture. Students memorize. Tests measure how much information they've retained. But Socrates understood that real learning isn't about memorization. It's about transformation. It's about learning to think for yourself, to question assumptions, to see clearly. You can't lecture someone into wisdom. You can only create conditions where wisdom can arise. That's what Socratic teaching does. Through questions and dialogue, it activates critical thinking. It makes students active participants in their own learning. They're not passive receivers of information. They're active discoverers of truth. This approach is more relevant now than ever. In an age where information is everywhere, memorizing facts is pointless. You can Google anything in seconds. What matters is the ability to evaluate information critically. To distinguish truth from propaganda. To think independently. To solve novel problems. These skills can't be downloaded. They have to be cultivated through practice, through questioning, through dialogue. So whether you're a teacher, a parent, or simply someone who wants to learn better, embrace the Socratic approach. Don't just accept what you're told. Ask why. Dig deeper. Challenge ideas respectfully. Seek to understand rather than just to know. And if you're helping others learn, don't just give them answers. Give them questions. Help them think their way to understanding. That's what Socrates did. He left behind no textbooks, but he created generations of thinkers. Because he didn't fill minds. He awakened them. And once a mind is truly awake, it never goes back to sleep. Now the 12th lesson takes us to mortality. Face death with wisdom and grace. When Socrates drank the hemlock poison that would kill him, he was 70 years old. His friends surrounded him, weeping. His body would soon go numb, his breathing would slow, and he would die. Yet Socrates was calm. More than calm, he was cheerful. He spent his final hours discussing philosophy, particularly the question of what happens after death. He argued that death might be a blessing. If death is simply dreamless sleep, what's to fear? And if there's an afterlife, he'd get to meet great thinkers who died before him and continue philosophical conversations for eternity. Either way, he wins. This attitude astounds me. Most of us fear death. We avoid thinking about it. We distract ourselves from its inevitability. But Socrates walked toward death consciously, with eyes wide open, and found peace. How? Because he'd lived and examined life. He'd spent decades clarifying his values, understanding what mattered, and living according to his principles. When death came, he had no regrets. He'd lived fully. He'd remained true to himself. So death wasn't a tragedy. It was simply the next chapter. This teaches us something vital. The way you die reflects the way you've lived. If you live unconsciously, driven by fear and desire, death will terrify you. But if you live with purpose, guided by values, death becomes just another experience to face with equanimity. Socrates' peaceful death wasn't about some special courage he possessed. It was the natural result of a life well lived. He'd done the work of examining his life, understanding his values, and aligning his actions with those values. So when the end came, he was ready. Not because he wanted to die, but because he'd truly lived. This is the gift of an examined life. It prepares you not just for living, but for dying. So don't wait. Don't avoid the big questions. What do you value most? What would you regret not doing? What legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to be remembered? These aren't morbid questions. They're clarifying questions. They help you live more intentionally. Because when you've thought about death, really thought about it, you stop wasting life. You stop sweating small stuff. You focus on what truly matters. And when your time comes, like Socrates, you can face it with wisdom and grace. The 13th lesson speaks to conviction. Don't compromise your soul for comfort. Throughout Socrates' trial, he had opportunities to save himself. He could have stopped teaching. He could have apologized. He could have proposed exile instead of execution. He could have escaped when Crito offered, Any of these choices would have let him live longer. But each would have required compromising his principles. And Socrates valued his soul, his integrity, his moral character, more than his life. He'd spent decades teaching that virtue is the highest good, that the health of the soul matters more than wealth or comfort or even survival. If he abandoned those teachings to save himself, he'd prove he never really believed them. His life would become a lie. So he chose death over dishonesty. He chose integrity over survival. This is the ultimate test of conviction. It's easy to have principles when they don't cost you anything. But when following your principles means losing something precious, that's when you discover what you really believe. Socrates believed his teachings. He believed them more than he feared death. And that belief gave him power that his executors could never touch. They could kill his body, but they couldn't touch his soul. What are you willing to sacrifice for your convictions? Most of us will never face Socrates' choice. We won't be executed for our beliefs. But we face smaller tests every day. Do you speak up when everyone else stays silent? Do you tell an uncomfortable truth when a comfortable lie would be easier? Do you stand by your values when it costs you popularity, money, or opportunity? These daily choices reveal your true character. They show whether your principles are real or just aspirational. Socrates challenges us to live with that level of integrity. To value our soul, our inner character, our moral compass, more than any external reward or punishment. Because at the end of your life, all those external things fade. What remains is who you became, the person you chose to be. And if you've maintained your integrity, if you've lived according to your deepest values, you'll have no regrets. You'll be able to say, like Socrates, that you lived an examined life, a life of principle, a life worth living. That's a reward no one can take from you. That's the true meaning of success. The 14th lesson brings us to wisdom. Wisdom begins with self-knowledge. Carved above the entrance to the temple at Delphi were two words, know thyself. This maxim guided Socrates' entire philosophy. He believed that self-knowledge was the foundation of all wisdom. You can't live well if you don't know who you are. You can't make good decisions if you don't understand your own biases, fears, and desires. You can't find happiness if you're chasing goals that aren't really yours. So the path to wisdom must begin with looking inward. Who am I? What do I value? What drives my decisions? What fears hold me back? What stories do I tell myself? Socrates spent his life examining not just others, but himself. He questioned his own assumptions. He studied his own reactions. He tried to understand his own nature. And this self-examination made him wise. Because once you understand yourself, you understand human nature. You see the patterns that drive behavior. You recognize truth when you encounter it. You make decisions aligned with your authentic self, not with some image you're trying to project. But self-knowledge isn't easy. It requires brutal honesty. You have to look at parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. Your pettiness. Your insecurities. Your rationalizations. The ways you lie to yourself. This is uncomfortable work. That's why most people avoid it. They'd rather stay busy, distracted, always looking outward, never turning the mirror on themselves. But Socrates teaches us that this inward journey is necessary. You can't skip it. You can't fake it. You must do the work of knowing yourself. So how do you start? Begin with simple observation. Notice your reactions. When do you get angry? What makes you anxious? When do you feel most alive? What patterns repeat in your life? Don't judge these observations. Just notice them. Then ask deeper questions. Why do I react this way? What belief drives this pattern? Is this belief true, or did I adopt it without examining it? Where did this fear come from? Is it still serving me? This investigation reveals layers. You discover that many of your beliefs and behaviors aren't really yours. They're inherited from parents, absorbed from culture, adopted from peers. Once you see this, you can choose. You can keep what serves you and release what doesn't. You can become more authentically yourself. And that authenticity is the foundation of wisdom. Because wisdom isn't about knowing everything external. It's about knowing yourself so well that you can navigate life with clarity and purpose. That's what Socrates offers. Not a set of doctrines, but a method for discovering your own truth. Know thyself. Then live from that knowing. That's the path to wisdom. The 15th lesson addresses society. Challenge corruption with questions, not violence. Socrates lived during tumultuous times in Athens. Democracy had collapsed temporarily. 30 tyrants ruled brutally. When democracy was restored, the city was traumatized and suspicious. In this climate, Socrates could have led a revolution. He was beloved by youth. He had moral authority. He could have organized resistance. But that wasn't his way. He knew violence breeds violence. He knew killing tyrants often just creates new tyrants. So instead, he challenged corruption with questions. He asked leaders to define justice. He asked citizens to examine their choices. He asked everyone to think more deeply about how society should function. This was a revolutionary act, but a non-violent one. By teaching people to think critically, Socrates armed them with something more powerful than swords: ideas. And ideas can't be killed. They spread. They inspire. They transform society from within. This approach influenced thinkers throughout history. Gandhi used nonviolent resistance to free India. Martin Luther King Jr. fought injustice with moral clarity and peaceful protest. Both credited philosophical traditions that trace back to Socrates. The lesson is clear: meaningful change comes not from violence, but from transformed consciousness. You don't defeat bad ideas by killing people who hold them. You defeat bad ideas with better ideas. You don't end tyranny by becoming a tyrant yourself. You end it by awakening people to truth. This is harder than violence. It takes longer. It requires patience. But it lasts. Because people who've genuinely understood truth won't easily be fooled again. They've developed the mental tools to think for themselves. So when you see injustice, corruption, or wrong ideas gaining power, resist the urge to fight fire with fire. Instead, ask questions. Challenge assumptions. Expose contradictions. Help people think more clearly. This is Socrates' legacy. This is how one unarmed philosopher changed civilization. Not through force, but through the quiet power of reason and dialogue. Now the 16th lesson explores influence. Teach through example, not preaching. Socrates never stood on a platform and delivered sermons. He never wrote instruction manuals. He simply lived his philosophy and invited others to observe. When he said virtue was the highest good, he lived simply, without pursuing wealth or status. When he said truth matters more than popularity, he spoke unpopular truths even when threatened. When he said we should examine our lives, he spent every day in public self-examination. People learned from him not because he told them what to do, but because they watched him do it. His life was his lesson. This is the most powerful form of teaching. Anyone can talk about integrity, but living it is different. Anyone can preach about courage, but demonstrating it is rare. Anyone can say they value truth, but choosing truth over comfort proves it. Socrates understood that actions speak louder than words. His students learned more from watching him drink the hemlock than from any lecture he could have given. In that moment, they saw what it means to live and die with principle. They saw philosophy not as abstract theory, but as a way of life. This challenges all of us who want to influence others. Whether you're a parent, teacher, leader, or friend, people are watching how you live, not just listening to what you say. Your children will imitate your behavior far more than they'll follow your advice. Your team will mirror your work ethic, not your mission statement. Your friends will absorb your values through observation, not through lectures. So if you want to teach courage, be courageous. If you want to inspire integrity, live with integrity. If you want to encourage critical thinking, demonstrate it yourself. Your life is your message. Make sure it's worth learning from. This doesn't mean you must be perfect. Socrates wasn't perfect. But he was consistent. He was authentic. He practiced what he preached. And that authenticity made him unforgettable. So stop worrying about finding the right words. Start living in a way worth watching. That's how you truly teach. That's how you genuinely influence. That's the Socratic way. The 17th lesson addresses success. True success is measured by the health of your soul, not the size of your bank account. In Athens, like today, people chased wealth, power, and fame. They thought success meant having more money, a bigger house, more influence. Socrates rejected this entirely. He said the only thing that matters is the state of your soul. Are you becoming more virtuous or more corrupt? Are you growing wiser or more foolish? Are you living with integrity or compromise? These questions determine real success. Not your net worth. Not your job title. Not your social status. The health of your soul. What does that mean practically? It means prioritizing character over comfort. It means choosing actions that strengthen your integrity, even when easier options are available. It means investing in wisdom more than in possessions. It means caring more about who you're becoming than about what you're accumulating. Socrates lived this completely. He wore the same robe for years. He owned almost nothing. He never took money for teaching. By conventional measures, he was a failure. He had no career. He built no business. He left no inheritance. But by his own measure, he was supremely successful. He lived according to his values. He pursued wisdom daily. He maintained his integrity to the end. His soul was healthy, strong, vibrant. And that inner health gave him peace that no amount of money could buy. He faced death without fear because his soul was in order. That's real success. Now think about your own life. What are you really pursuing? If you gained everything you're chasing right now, wealth, status, possessions, would your soul be healthier? Would you be more virtuous, wiser, more at peace? Or would you just be more comfortable while remaining fundamentally unchanged? These are hard questions, but they're essential. Because Socrates is right. At the end of your life, you won't care about your bank balance. You'll care about who you became. Did you live with integrity? Did you treat people well? Did you grow wiser? Did you stay true to your values? That's what matters. That's the only success that lasts. So invest in your soul. Make decisions that strengthen your character. Choose virtue over convenience. Pursue wisdom over wealth. That's the path to real, lasting success. That's what Socrates teaches us. Let me share the 18th lesson. Friendship means helping others become better, not just making them comfortable. Socrates had many friends, but his friendships were unique. He didn't spend time with friends just to relax and have fun. He spent time challenging them, questioning them, pushing them to examine their lives and grow. His friends sometimes found this exhausting. They'd complain that he never let anything slide, that every conversation became philosophical. But Socrates believed this was true friendship. A real friend doesn't just affirm you. They help you become better. They challenge your bad ideas. They hold you accountable to your own values. They push you to grow. This is radically different from how most of us approach friendship. We want friends who agree with us, who make us feel good, who don't challenge us too much. We avoid conflict, overlook flaws, and keep things comfortable. But Socrates would say this isn't friendship. It's mutual comfort, and mutual comfort doesn't lead to growth. True friendship, Socratic friendship, involves difficult conversations. It means saying, "I love you, but I think you're wrong about this." It means asking hard questions when you see a friend making destructive choices. It means being willing to risk the relationship to help them see truth. This kind of friendship is rare because it requires courage from both people. The friend speaking truth risks rejection. The friend receiving it must control their ego and really listen. But when both people commit to this kind of relationship, magic happens. You grow faster. You see your blind spots. You become better versions of yourselves. This is what Socrates offered his friends. Not empty validation, but genuine care expressed through challenge and dialogue. So evaluate your friendships. Are they helping you grow, or just keeping you comfortable? And more importantly, are you being a Socratic friend to others? Are you willing to have hard conversations? Can you challenge someone you love without attacking them? Can you speak truth wrapped in genuine care? This is how Socrates loved people. Not by making them comfortable, but by helping them become better. That's real friendship. That's love in action. The 19th lesson takes us to criticism. Welcome criticism as a gift, not an attack. Most people fear criticism. They defend against it, argue with it, rationalize why it doesn't apply to them. But Socrates welcomed criticism. He sought it out. He believed that criticism was the fastest path to improvement. Because we all have blind spots. We all have flaws we can't see in ourselves. We need others to point them out. When someone criticized Socrates, he didn't get defensive. He asked questions. Why do you think that? What have you observed? How could I improve? He treated criticism as valuable information, not personal attack. This attitude transformed criticism from something threatening into something useful. Now, not all criticism is helpful. Some comes from people trying to tear you down rather than build you up. Socrates understood this distinction. He evaluated the source. If criticism came from someone who genuinely cared about truth and his growth, he took it seriously. If it came from malice or ignorance, he dismissed it. But here's the key, he evaluated it. He didn't automatically reject all criticism because some of it was baseless. He gave each piece a fair hearing. This is wisdom we desperately need today. We live in an age of constant criticism. Social media means everyone has opinions about everything and everyone. It's tempting to build walls, to reject all criticism, to insist we're fine as we are. But that path leads to stagnation. You stop growing. You stop seeing yourself clearly. You become brittle and defensive. The Socratic approach is different. Stay open. When someone criticizes you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is there truth in this? Even if it's exaggerated or poorly expressed, is there a kernel of insight I should consider? Can I learn something from this? This doesn't mean accepting every criticism. It means giving each one fair consideration. And here's what happens when you do this, you grow faster. You improve constantly. You become less fragile because criticism no longer threatens you. It just informs you. You become confident in a deep way, not because you think you're perfect, but because you know you can handle feedback and grow from it. So practice welcoming criticism. When someone challenges you, take a breath. Thank them for their perspective. Consider it honestly. If it's valid, apply it. If it's not, release it. But don't automatically defend. That's ego talking. Let wisdom guide you instead. That's the Socratic way. Now the 20th and final lesson brings everything together. Legacy isn't about what you leave behind, but about who you leave behind. Socrates built no monuments. He wrote no books. He accumulated no wealth. Yet 2,500 years later, we're still talking about him. How is this possible? Because he invested in people. He spent his life teaching others to think, to question, to examine their lives, to pursue virtue. And those people, especially Plato, carried his ideas forward. Plato taught Aristotle. Aristotle taught Alexander the Great. The chain continued through centuries, shaping Western philosophy, science, democracy, education, everything we consider civilization today. All because one man invested in awakening minds. This is the ultimate lesson. Your legacy isn't the stuff you accumulate. It's the people you influence. The values you model. The wisdom you share. The example you set. When you die, your possessions will be divided, sold, or thrown away. But the impact you made on people's thinking, character, and lives will ripple forward through time in ways you'll never see or measure. So if you want to matter, if you want your life to count for something beyond your own experience, invest in people. Teach them to think critically. Challenge them to examine their lives. Model integrity and courage. Ask them hard questions. Help them grow. Be a Socratic presence in their lives. You don't need to be a famous philosopher. You don't need a platform or credentials. You just need to genuinely care about truth and about helping others discover it. When you live this way, you become part of something bigger than yourself. You join a conversation that's been happening for millennia, the pursuit of wisdom, of virtue, of truth. Socrates started it with his questions in ancient Athens. It continued through his students and their students. It reached you today through this message. And now you get to carry it forward. You get to be the next link in the chain. So here's my challenge to you: take one lesson from Socrates' life and apply it this week. Maybe you'll start questioning your assumptions. Maybe you'll examine your life more honestly. Maybe you'll speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Maybe you'll welcome criticism as a gift. Maybe you'll invest in helping someone else think more clearly. Whatever you choose, do it intentionally. Do it with Socrates' spirit of relentless pursuit of truth and virtue. Because here's what I believe: the world needs more Socratic thinking today than ever before. We're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. We're shouting opinions but rarely engaging in real dialogue. We're building platforms but neglecting character. We need people willing to ask hard questions. To live examined lives. To value truth over comfort. To pursue virtue over success. To challenge corruption with ideas. To teach through example. To invest in people more than possessions. That's the Socratic revolution. And it starts with you. Socrates never wrote a word, but his life wrote a message that echoes through centuries. Your life is writing a message too. What does it say? What will people learn from watching you live? What legacy will you leave, not in monuments or money, but in minds and hearts you've touched? These are the questions Socrates would ask you. And I'm asking them now. Because an unexamined life isn't worth living. But an examined life, a life lived with purpose and principle, a life spent pursuing truth and helping others do the same, that's a life worth living. That's a life that matters. That's the life Socrates lived, and it's the life he invites you to live too. So begin today. Ask questions. Seek wisdom. Live with integrity. Challenge yourself and others. Pursue truth relentlessly. And remember, you don't know everything. None of us do. But admitting that, as Socrates did, is the first step toward real wisdom. The journey begins now. Welcome to the examined life.